Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Copper has emerged as a key metal in the global economy. In India, its usage is increasing, though there is potential for more offtake. Though copper prices are low currently in view of the global trade issues, the red metal is seen as one that can increase further. Leaving aside the current bearish trend and looking at India, what are the prospects for copper in India? Where can its usage increase? Do we need to have a policy to ensure that ample copper is available in India for domestic industries? To tell us more on these, we have with us Mr. Mayur Karmarkar, Managing Director, International Copper Association, India. Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, Mr. Mayur Karmarkar. So, a lot of things are happening with regard to copper. How was copper consumption in India in the 2024-25 fiscal? How will it be this fiscal?
Thank you, Mr. Subramani. Thanks for inviting me on this podcast. We don't say copper consumption. We say copper usage because copper is not consumed. It is used in one form and then they recycle in another form. So coming back on the specifics for the last year, total copper demand or usage was somewhere around little over 1.8 million tons, sorry. And this demand has grown around a little over 8% compared to the previous financial year. In this fiscal year, we are seeing that demand trend is going similar. We are seeing the pattern of the demand, which is largely linked with the capital formation in private and public sector and the consumer spending, which relates to the copper demand overall. That correlation is very strong. And as a result, we have seen the instances wherein the growth overall happening, particularly after the COVID, the pattern is similar. Now, getting on a specifics on the trained part of it, as you might know, that the around 60% of the copper demand in India comes from the economic development, which largely represents the building construction sector, infrastructure, and the industrial growth. And we have seen that these sectors has the copper demand in these sectors has overgrown this sectorial growth, largely because quality of the infrastructure is also changing a lot. Quality of buildings today being constructed is far better and more resource intensive than before because the building heights are increasing in currently. Then every occupant, which may be the office or the residential or the commercial area, the need of the electricity is also increasing substantially. So as a result of that, we see the building construction growth is phenomenal, and it's a very strong driver for copper growth. The next one is infrastructure. In infrastructure growth, which is around what we have seen is around 13% this year, which is largely coming from the investments overall in the power sector, which includes renewable, and then the power distribution, and then the other infrastructures, which includes the telecom and the urban infrastructure in terms of metro, etc. So the urban infrastructure and overall infrastructure will remain strong as long as government will keep on investing in that infrastructure, and in the private sector will keep investing in a building and construction area. The next one is the industrial, and industrial growth is, although the industrial growth to the GDP is not, I mean, within the GDP, the industry portion of the GDP is still not significant like some of the industrialized country or recently grown as an industrialized country. But thanks to PLI and Make in India, we are seeing the industrial sector growing, and with that, the copper demand in the industrial sector also growing in a double digit. So overall, there are strong sectorial pillars which is driving the copper demand and which is largely dependent on the capital formation at the government and the private sector, and then the consumption in the private sector. And consumption in the private sector largely represents the consumer durables, the cars, and other consumer product where the copper is there.
Sir, is there any sunrise sector for copper usage?
The sunrise sector for copper usage, definitely we can still say that the electric mobility is the sunrise sector, and particularly in electric mobility with the PLIs and so much Make in India is creating a huge investment opportunities in manufacturing the battery cells or manufacturing the electric motors used for the EV, which were earlier imported. So as a result of that, as per the current number, there are something like 118 gigawatt hours of the battery projects which is announced and will come up within next 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And all those cells will, if they start producing in India, definitely we will require additional copper in India, the demand coming in India, which is definitely creating the urgency of investing into new fabrication product like the EV foil, which is required for the batteries for manufacturing cells anode. So that is the one investment opportunity, and definitely we'll see some products coming out very soon. Then within that sunrise sector, the opportunity is electric motor. Those electric motors are different than the normal electric motor. Besides that, there is another sector which is still talked a lot but has not picked up yet is the data center. I'm saying on a comparative global scale, not picked up. Definitely, we are doing better compared to what we have done the previous year. But we have added more than 1 gigawatt of data center capacity in a country in last year. But at the same time, US has added more than 25 gigawatt. US is the global leader in a data center. Now, each data center requires almost like 18 tons of copper per megawatt of data center capacity. These data centers are highly energy intensive, and it requires a huge electrical network for connecting the racks and all the data hardwares, and also cooling. Currently, we use almost like 17 tons, as I mentioned, but at the same time, we also have to understand that our learning still has to pick up in having better designs. US is using more than, I remember 38 kilos per 38 tons per same megawatt, as against we are using 17. So currently, the design philosophies are largely based on having the lower cost, but what is prioritized in data center design is the highest redundancy, highest reliability, and the best efficiencies. So that is the trend in the data center sector, and AI is going to drive the need for the data center further. It all also depends on the reliability of the power, the cost of the power, but data center is another sunrise sector. And within next 5 year, by 2030, there are various estimates for this growth. We estimate to have around total cumulative capacity of 17 gigawatt. But at the same time, US also is investing a very huge on data center. The scales are different, but definitely compared to what we have done in the past, I think we will keep on improving.
So how much has scrap usage in copper recycling improved?
This is a very peculiar question, and we have to understand one, copper is being highly recyclable. The end of life scrap coming into the economy in the country is depends on how much of the scrap was used when these products were built. So average life of copper products in India, as per our study, is little over 20 years. So whatever the copper was used 20 years ago in different forms, the average is going to come out for the recycling. So as per our estimate in the financial 2025, we estimate to have total copper and copper alloy scrap totally generated to be around 490,000 ton, which is a big number. Plus, we are also importing around 200 plus tons of copper and copper alloy scrap. So overall, we are seeing that the usage of scrap in meeting the total copper demands is somewhere around 38 to 39%, and that trend continues. The question is whether the scrap is recycled. Can it be called as recycled or remelted? And that is a larger debate overall. Unlike many other developed economies, the end of life product is refined and converted into the uh, cathode grade material with the similar properties. In our case, we generally have remelting with little fire refining or skimming, you can say. So it is largely still called as remelted. But the best part of our country is that none of the copper goes under landfill. Our collection rate is more than 95%, and we remelt or reuse almost all the copper there in economy. Going forward, I think that the share of the recycled content largely, if you take the imports out in the future understanding, we will be using the copper which we have used 20 years ago as a scrap in our current metal balance.
Given the current concerns around rare earth mineral supply, how can India mitigate similar risks for copper in the future?
That's a very good question. Uh, the Chinese current the control over the critical mineral, and as a result, the auto industry got awake, and there has been a lot of initiatives done by different countries to ease out the overall industry. So there was a supply risk in a critical mineral. The critical mineral also has another component, which is the future cost to the economy. So those are the two risks which is there. And I'm talking this from the long-term perspective. Now, if you really see China as a country which is dominating the entire processing of the critical mineral and to some extent mining. As far as copper is concerned, China is still representing 45% of the refined copper production globally and 53%. Now, why it has happened is because China has put a huge investments in processing. So the first part in terms of de-risking ourselves, in terms of having such a risk rising with copper, and copper is more keen because if tomorrow there is some issue on a copper supply, then our all the sectors of the economy are going to face the problem. So it is a larger economic risk, and that is very important. In order to mitigate that, there are various approaches which are there. The first one is that explore and improve the domestic mining, do further exploration, not only in the land mining but also the deep sea mining. So improve and promote domestic deep sea exploration activity is the first one. The second one is that the G to G relationship for all copper producing country is important so that the de-risking by changing the behavior of one country on one market can be avoided. The dependency on one sourcing country can be avoided. The next point is that we also, as a India, is going to require almost like more than five times of the demand which we have today by 2047. So we just have to also encourage the Indian PSUs and the private companies form the JVs for the mining into other copper-rich country. So that will help us to source the material from those Indian companies, particularly the private sector PSUs. The next thing can be done is that we have to ensure that the processing industry in India grows. That means the smelting and refining is the foundation between the mining to the industry, and which that capacities need to grow every 5 year. We are estimating that we will require additional 500,000 ton minimum to be added into the the metal processing. Not only that, we also have to set up the recycling technology and the recycling industry network overall, wherein we can use the scrap and get converted that into copper equivalent to the the LME cathode. So that is possible. What we need is technology. Then most important thing is that we also have to ban the export of the copper scrap, particularly high-grade copper scrap. Currently, we have seen that the many people who are doing small-time fire refining or skimming, they are basically low-grade copper scrap. They are converting to higher grade and exporting that back to China. Those numbers are not very big, but in a previous year it was 7 ton. This year it has gone to 20 ton. Now, if these type of the export keeps on happening, we will be losing our resources which we have bought in a country. And that brings the very important point as a part of the strategy, that how we can keep the scrap what we have used in previous year. Because as you know, almost 80% of the mine copper is still under circulation due to the recycling property, and we always have to leverage that and make sure that we keep using our own material, and there is a larger economic benefit to that.
Stockpiling is being discussed as one of the potential strategies. How applicable is this approach for copper?
Yeah, I mean, stockpiling is possible. I mean, stockpiling strategy is necessarily required when you have the temporary supply disturbance. And yes, stockpiling for critical mineral is being taught, particularly the minerals which has, lower tonnage or the lower demand at the moment. So that definitely can be stockpiled, particularly the rare earth metals which requires in a few tons, which can be easily stockpiled. But copper like material stockpiling is not a right word for that. But what we can learn from the other country is to build the functional reserves of the copper, leveraging on the recycling property. Today, we are almost like 1 kilo per capita is our copper demand. Now, if you see, if we have to be a developed economy, that demand will still grow up higher. Now, to meet that, we will be requiring copper in different form. Our dependency on mining is still relatively smaller. So in such situation, the countries such as Japan or other country, what they have done is that during the economic development period, they have used the copper extensively, so that that copper remains in a functional stock in within the economy. So and then the economy gets matured, the growth gets matured, economy becomes developed. Definitely, your demand for the resources will be low. So during that time, you can largely depend on the recycling and reduce the dependency on the imported raw materials, because they can reduce the cost, because cost to the economy of recycling is much lower compared to buying the mine ore from different part of the world. So if you see country like China, China has developed sub-functional reserves of more than 120 million ton. And particularly China, if you see as an individual country, they have got more copper in use and also some copper below the ground. So as a result of that, below the ground and above the ground reserves, China has the highest one there. It stands out very clearly. Now, if you see the entire European Union over the development cycle of last century, they have created the stock of 83 million ton, as against their demand is only 3.2 million ton. But in India, we have only got the stock of 15 million ton in use, and we require almost like 1.8 million ton as a new demand, but refined copper demand is 1 million ton plus. So definitely we have a clear lower resources or reserves in use for copper. So as a policy, we should change that scenario, and we should start using copper earlier than is required. So this is going to save the future additional cost to the economy, and also going to have more self-reliance through the recycling route, which is also going to help the environment in a larger scale. So I can say in short that the stockpiling in copper, you can call it as, building up the functional reserves. And it's not very different. If you really see, take an example of gold, reserves, the functional reserves of gold in the housewives in India almost is like 11% of the total gold reserves as per World Gold Council. So we hold 11% of the reserve. Our ladies in the country holds 11% of the global gold reserves, and we buy only 800 ton as a new gold. Now, this gold is being used in ornaments or jewelry, and then it is being converted into new jewelry and passed on generation to generation. So this is what the real practical example we are living with in our houses. Now, if we extend the similar logic to the industrial material or the infrastructure material, the situation will not be different, but only the material, instead of lying in a form of jewelry of every housewife, it will lie in a form of some functioning conductor, which is used in the some infrastructure owned by the private sector or the government sector. And that's how I think we can be more resilient in terms of any future risk and also the future cost to the economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karmarkar. Thank you all for tuning in. Until we meet in our next episode, this is Subramani Ra Mancombu signing off. Bye.